welcome to the Costa Mesa Planning Commission meeting for Monday, March 23rd, 2020. I call the meeting to order, and I have a brief statement I want to read tonight. In order to minimize the spread of the COVID-19 virus, Governor Newsom has issued an executive orders that temporarily suspend requirements of the Brown Act. Please be advised that the council chambers are closed to the public and that some or all of the Planning Commission members may be attending this meeting telephonically, which they all are doing tonight, save for the chair. So one, you are strongly encouraged to observe the Planning Commission meeting live on Costa Mesa TV, Spectrum Channel 3, and at AT&T Uverse Channel 99, and online at youtube.com/Costa Mesa TV. This is very important to the members of the public. If you wish to make a comment on a specific agenda item, please submit your comment via email to pcpubliccomments@costamesaca.gov. Again, that email address is pcpubliccomments@costamesaca.gov. Comments will be accepted continuously during the meeting and will be read into the record up to 3 minutes per email. And with that, I will ask Julie to please call the roll. I'm sorry, I will do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie. Roll call, please.
Chair Jericho.
Here.
Vice Chair Harlan.
Here.
Commissioner Colbert.
Present.
Commissioner Perkins.
Here.
Commissioner Russell.
Here.
Commissioner Tourget.
Here.
Commissioner Zick.
Here.
And let the record also reflect that Tarquin Preziosi is present via phone, Barry Curtis is present via phone, Bart Mejia is present via phone, and Caitlin Walsh is present via phone.
Thank you, Julie, very much. We have no announcements or presentations on the agenda this evening. This brings us to public comments. This process will be slightly, or a lot more than just slightly unusual than we normally do. Public comments will be accepted in real time via email at pcpubliccomments@costamesaca.gov on any item within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction which is not listed on the agenda this evening. Public comments will be read into the record up to 3 minutes. This time may be extended for good cause by the chair or a majority vote of the Planning Commission. Julie, do we have any public comment emails this evening?
Not at this moment.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll move on to Planning Commissioner comments and suggestions. Commissioner Zick, do you have any comments tonight?
No, I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Tourget?
None this evening.
Okay. Commissioner Perkins?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has disrupted their routines and their lives and their businesses to help everybody stay at home to slow the spread of SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus. I know it's hard, but based on the data I've seen, this is the only option we have to slow the spread of this virus and to potentially save hundreds of thousands of lives. I just wanted to share a little bit of data on why we really need to do this. One of the reasons we need to practice social distancing to stay home or at least 6 feet away from other people, even if we're not sick, is that up to half of the people who get infected with this virus may never show symptoms, yet can still spread the virus. And of those who do show symptoms, there's clear data that people are infectious before the onset of symptoms. So again, people who feel perfectly healthy, who look perfectly healthy, can be spreading this virus. And these virions can remain viable, can remain infectious on surfaces like stainless steel and plastic for up to 3 days. This is probably going to go on for months, and it's going to be very, very hard. It's going to take all of us coming together. But to stop the spread of this virus, to save lives, we need to stay home, stay a safe distance from other people. So thank you all to everyone who's working so hard to try to help us get through this. That is all.
Thank you, Commissioner Perkins. Commissioner Russell, any comment tonight?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Colbert.
Yes, a few comments. Similar to Commissioner Perkins, I too would just like to thank the staff and the community workers and all of those who are braving the outside as we have to manage and advance democracy during these difficult times. This evening, I'm just grateful to be able to participate with you and convene this meeting in accordance with the CDC guidelines and recommendations, and I pray that everyone continues to remain safe and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you all again in person really soon.
Thank you, Commissioner Colbert. Vice Chair Harlan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo the comments of my colleagues, their concerns and about the situation that we're in. I do want to give a special commendation and recognition to the city staff, many of whom are still keeping our government operating right now, which I think is important for people to know. It took a great amount of effort to get this meeting up and running, and I have no doubt that our chair will be running this smoothly. So I especially want to thank staff at this time.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Just a general comment, and I appreciate, Commissioners, all your comments relative to the public health situation we're dealing with. I, too, really want to thank the staff for incredible amount of hard work they're putting in as they kind of work their way through keeping the staff safe. Our public safety professionals, police and fire, who are still on the front lines making sure that we're all protected. And to all the people who are actually obeying the kind of stay-at-home directive from the governor, as immensely difficult as it is and disruptive as it is, it is important that we do our best to keep ourselves isolated so we can kind of take this wind out of the sails of this virus, which is not anything I've experienced in my lifetime, and I've been around a while. So thank you all for your flexibility and for your accommodation, and I appreciate it very much. And everybody stay safe and healthy, and all the wash your hands and all that important stuff. This brings us to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the Planning Commission, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for discussion. The public can make this request via email at pcpubliccomments@costamesaca.gov and should include the item number to be addressed. Items removed from the consent calendar will be discussed and voted upon immediately following Planning Commission action on the remainder of the consent calendar. And Julie, I would ask, have we received any emails from the public with regard to the consent calendar?
We have not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any motion on the consent calendar? And I will let anyone jump in first who wants to make that motion. I'm sorry?
This is Commissioner Colbert. I would like to make a motion to approve consent items 1 through 6, I believe.
Okay, I will second that. Commissioners, if you are not present or not a part of the commission for any of these meetings, please register your abstention vote when you are voice called, when the voice roll is called. So there's a motion on the floor to approve the consent calendar. The chair has seconded. Julie, could you do a voice roll call, please? Take your time.
Commissioner Perkins,
Abstain from all 6. I was not present.
Commissioner Russell,
I'm abstaining from item 6. I was not on.
Okay, and Commissioner Russell, are you voting aye for the balance of the consent calendar?
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Harlan,
I'm abstaining from the June 24th item and am voting aye for the balance.
Commissioner Zick,
I'm abstaining from item number 2, the July 22nd meeting I was absent from, and I'm voting aye for the balance of the items.
okay, and Commissioner Zick, you said for number 6?
No, number 2, the
Number
July
2,
22nd
sorry.
meeting.
Okay. And Commissioner Torje.
I'm voting yes for the call, and I was absent for item 6 and item 1.
Julie.
1 second, please.
Hold on.
Okay, sorry, Commissioner Colbert.
Julie, I would just like to clarify that item 5, the June 10th meeting, I would like to abstain from that as I was not present during that meeting.
Okay. So let me just make sure I have everything correct. Commissioner Russell, you are abstaining from consent calendar 6.
Yes.
Vice Chair Harlan, you are abstaining from the 24th, which is number 4.
That's correct.
Commissioner Zick, you're abstaining from number 2.
That's correct, Julie. Thank you.
And Commissioner Torje, you're abstaining from number 1 and number 6.
Correct.
And Commissioner Colbert, you are abstaining from number 5?
Correct.
Okay.
No, I have
The
to
record-
vote.
Sorry, what?
I have to vote.
Oh, I thought you was, okay.
I'm-
Sorry, Chair.
I'm just voting, I'm voting aye on all of them.
Okay. So let the record reflect that the motion was approved with Commissioner Perkins abstaining from all consent calendar items, Commissioner Russell abstaining for consent calendar item number 6, Vice Chair Harlan abstaining from consent calendar item number 4, Commissioner Zick abstaining from consent calendar item number 2, Commissioner Torje abstaining from consent calendar item number 1 and 6, and Commissioner Colbert abstaining from number 5.
Great. Thank you very much, Julie and commissioners. That was well done. It was like solid single off the end of the bat. Excellent. Okay, so that takes us to public hearings. Again, we have 3 tonight. Planning application, public hearing number 1 is planning application 19-31. Julie, could you read that into the record, please?
Public hearing item number 1, planning application 19-31 for a conditional use permit to operate an escape room, unlocked escape room, and a minor conditional use permit for deviation from parking requirements at 1111 Baker Street, Building A. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Commissioners, any ex parte communications to report? Commissioner Zick?
None.
Commissioner Torje?
None.
Commissioner Perkins?
None.
Commissioner Russell?
None.
Commissioner Colbert?
None.
Vice Chair Harlan?
None.
And I have none. Mr. Lee, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The item before the Commission this evening is two-part. The first is a conditional use permit to operate an escape room, which I'll explain in the next slide. This will be within an existing 3,800 square foot building, and a minor conditional use permit to deviate from parking requirements based on unique operating characteristics. 38 parking spaces required, 17 parking spaces provided. By way of background, the property is located on the south side of Baker Street. It is zoned MG, which is general industrial. The site actually contains two buildings, Building A, which is the subject building, and Building B, which is a fencing contractor. You can see it outlined on the map exhibit here. The parcel also extends out to a portion of a shared parking lot that you can see shaded in this diagram here. So basically, the way that these properties were configured when the buildings were built, each parcel extends out and takes up its own portion of the central parking area. We have recorded documents for reciprocal vehicle access, but not for reciprocal parking. So in other words, each parcel provides its own parking spaces on its own individual parcel. So as I mentioned, the property is zoned MG, which is general industrial, and actually immediately abutting the site, both to the north and to the east, are commercial zone properties which contain multi-tenant retail strip center type buildings, whereas the buildings on MG are predominantly industrial utilized. Here's a photograph of the subject property. The slide to the right is showing the Building A, which is the subject building. The slide to the left is showing the fencing contractor, which is towards the rear of the property. And this slide is showing the central parking area that I referenced earlier. Here is a site plan that further illustrates the shaded building is the subject building, and the building to the rear is the fencing contractor. There is a total of 36 on-site parking spaces. 17 parking spaces are within the central parking area that'll be utilized by the subject building shaded, and it's completely separated from the separate parking area that's utilized by the fencing contractor. Going back briefly to that earlier photograph, you can see once again on the left-hand slide, you can see that that area is actually separated by a vehicle gate that is closed when the fencing contractor is not in operation. That basically means that none of the guests or employees that are using the subject building will have access to the parking area at the rear of this parcel. So with regards to the escape room, for those who are not aware what an escape room is or what the concept is, escape rooms are an entertainment use where groups of guests pay to be placed within either a single room or a series of rooms, and they contain puzzles, riddles, or clues that the guests have to solve in order to escape from the rooms. Escape rooms are not a use that is listed within the Costa Mesa Municipal Code's land use matrix. However, that same code section allows uses that are not listed to be approved through a conditional use permit, which is the application that is before you this evening. This floor plan shows the layout of the interior, the proposed layout of the interior tenant space. The reasons that the rooms are shaded is that, for example, the rooms that are shaded, room 1 would contain one series of games that the guests would participate in, whereas the rows shaded would be a separate game within the building, and then the green shaded would be another separate game that would be contained within those color-coded rooms. So theoretically, there could be 3 different games going on within the different rooms, and the reason that they're color-coded is that basically as the game progresses, the guests would circulate through the similarly color-coded rooms. The proposed hours of operation are 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 11 a.m. to 11:45 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. Guest access to the escape room facility, which I mentioned earlier, is they pay to participate in these games. These are by appointment only. No walk-ins are accepted. Each game has a 60-minute time limit. The start of each game would be staggered so that no games start at the same time. The maximum number of players and staff will not exceed 17 at any given time, which corresponds to the number of available parking spaces that would be available to the players and staff. No players under the age of 12 are allowed. Players between 12 and 17 years must be accompanied by a parent or legal guardian, and no food or beverage service is proposed. So as I mentioned earlier, the required parking for escape room uses is 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet for a 3,800 square foot building. That would equate to 38 required parking spaces. Hence the request for the minor conditional use permit to deviate from shared parking for unique operating characteristics. In this case, the unique operating characteristics are the fact that the use will be operating during the hours of operation that are separate from the fence contractor, even though, as I mentioned earlier, their parking area is completely segregated from the subject building. And then once again, the operation will be limited to 17 persons, therefore ensuring that an adequate number of parking spaces will be provided for the use. At any given time, the escape room use is in operation. With that in mind, staff has incorporated in the draft resolution a condition of approval, number 8, that stipulates that if parking shortages or other parking-related problems arise, the business operator would have to institute appropriate operational measures in order to minimize and eliminate the problem, including but not limited to reducing the number of games, modifying the hours of operation, and or the maximum number of participants and or occupants. Staff is therefore recommending that the Planning Commission, 1, find that the project is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act under the CEQA Guidelines Section 15301 for existing facilities, and approve Planning Application 1931 subject to the recommended conditions of approval. This concludes my presentation. I can respond to any questions the commissioners may have, and the project applicant/operator is also present to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Commissioner Zick, do you have any questions of staff?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for the presentation, and thank you in advance for your patience trying to field questions from me in this rather unusual format. My first question has to do with the maximum number of players in the games. I'm assuming that those maximums are based on the applicant's business plan as opposed to a maximum that might be driven by the fire code. Am I correct about that?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then I'm looking at the numbers of people that they're planning on having, and I see that their maximum is 17, which matches the number of parking spaces that they have, and so that math, I think, is what they're using to justify the minor conditional use permit, and it's that math which you are using as one basis for recommending approval. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Zick, that is correct.
So a question that I have, and it comes to mind as I'm thinking about the logistics of the operation, and you might not have the answer, maybe the applicant would need to answer it, but I'll put the question out there. It appears that these, and I'm looking at handwritten page 10, that these games are staggered in the various rooms, and based on their math, the maximum number of people at any one time on premises is 17. And of course, that's one of the conditions of approval, number 3, in fact, on handwritten page 6, that says the maximum number of occupants, including employees, allowed in the building at any one time shall be no more than 17. So my question is this: are there additional games that are played where another group of people would be, say, waiting in the wings to come in and play? And I think the answer is yes when I look at handwritten page 10, and it looks like there's maybe a 30-minute gap or 45-minute gap between games. And so my question, what that raises is, how is it possible that 17 parking spaces would be sufficient if there are 17 people in the building at one time playing the game and more people potentially queuing up outside to play a subsequent game?
I will allow the applicant to answer that question, but as I mentioned in my presentation, the idea is that the starting time for each game would be staggered. But to answer your question, yes, I suppose there could be a potential spillover if people arrive early, for example, than the scheduled start time. But I will allow the applicant, who actually operates a facility similar to this in the city of Irvine, to address that specific question.
Okay, and so let me ask a question that's related to that, because it seems as if the numbers of people involved is partially based on this limited parking, and that the hours of operation are also determined to some extent in recognition of this. And so what I'm wondering is if we are accepting the real possibility that when the parking is used up, patrons will simply park in the areas dedicated to the adjacent businesses, and if they're closed, then we don't care if their parking spaces are used. I don't think that would be our view of it. Am I correct?
Yes, Commissioner Zick. Ideally, we want this site to be able to support the parking on its own rather than relying on spillover to the abutting properties, which is why that condition that you cited was written that way.
Now, I notice on, thank you for that. I notice on staff report page 3, you specifically identified that there is not a reciprocal parking agreement. Was there consideration given to requiring a reciprocal parking agreement that would have then made it pretty clear that spillover parking would be acceptable?
We did not request that of the applicant because the way that this particular property and the properties up and down that parking aisle are configured, they were all built in either the 50s or the 60s, and I'm assuming at the time reciprocal parking was not an ideal situation. So, but what we would have to do is not only with this property owner, but all of those subsequent property owners that utilize that parking area would have to be part of that agreement. So logistically, that would probably be something that could never be done.
Okay. And then you had a slide in your presentation where you mentioned, and it's in the staff report as well, no players under the age of 12 are allowed, and those between the ages of 12 and 17 have to be accompanied by a parent or guardian. Is that a rule of the operator, the applicant, or is that a rule that comes from the city?
That is the operator's rule.
Okay. And then sort of my last question has to do with the general plan conformance analysis. And so I'm looking at the bottom of staff report, page 4. And the first policy statement refers to encouraging a mix of land uses. So this is part of the justification for why this applicant or this application should be approved. And when we talk about a mix of land uses, is that statement referring to the zoning codification of land uses? And that's, in other words, are we encouraging a mix of land uses by virtue of having zoning designations, or is this statement to be interpreted as saying we encourage a mix of land uses by granting a bunch of conditional use permits?
That would be the latter statement. As I indicated, the property is zoned industrial, so normally you would not have this type of an entertainment use in an industrial zone. So by approving the conditional use permit, you're basically saying it's consistent with that general plan policy for encouraging a mix of land uses.
Got it. Okay. And then the second policy statement, you talk about the creative industry and support services for adjacent businesses. So just if you could help me understand what the thought process was about how we felt this business was compatible or supportive of the adjacent businesses, which look to me to be largely industrial and maybe automotive based. So if you could just help me understand that thought process.
Yes, Commissioner Zick, as I mentioned in my presentation, yes, the subject properties, this property and the properties to the south are industrial. However, the properties immediately to the north and to the east are commercial, which would therefore would basically support the commercial uses. For example, there's a convenience store in one of the spaces, so even though this applicant doesn't serve food or beverages, maybe they could avail themselves of one of the other stores or shops that are immediately abutting Baker Street.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for your report. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my questioning.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick, very much. Commissioner Tourget, do you have any questions of staff?
Yes, I have a couple questions. The first one is we have a couple other properties in the city of Costa Mesa with this operating as escape rooms. And I was wondering if they were in a similar land use designation as this one is proposed to be in.
Yes, as mentioned in the staff report, there are actually two other escape room uses within the city. One is in a commercial zoned property, a shopping center along Mesa Verde Drive East, and the other is in the Copper Tree Business Park? The one with the waterfall along Bristol Street. That's actually zoned for office uses, and they also had to go through a conditional use permit for that location.
Have we ever had any issues with those two operating as escape rooms with the conditional use permit from either the property owners adjacent or from other community members?
Not that I'm aware of, Commissioner Tourget.
Okay, that is my question for now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Torje. Commissioner Perkins, any questions of staff?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Thank you. Thank you again for the excellent staff presentation. And wanted to actually follow up with Commissioner Torje. I had a similar question on the other similar properties, whether there were any noise issues. And I think I read in the staff report, but I want to confirm all activities on this will be indoors, right? So I guess two questions there. Have there been noise complaints from similar properties, and can I get confirmation this is all happening indoors?
That is yes to both of those questions, Commissioner Perkins.
So there have been noise complaints from.
There haven't been noise complaints, but it is conducted entirely indoors, which is why there haven't been noise complaints.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. And then second question I have is also related to the parking question. As I understand it, we are limiting their operation to having 17 persons inside the building at any one time, which is including employees and members of the public. And then they have 17 parking spaces. Can you walk me through how we calculate parking needs in a case like this? So we have 17 people in the building. Do we necessarily need 17 parking spaces for those 17 people? What are the city guidelines and processes on this?
Yes, Commissioner Perkins, because the property is zoned industrial, it does have a lower parking requirement of 3 spaces for every 1,000 square feet. Like I mentioned, for these types of uses, we calculate them at 10 spaces for every 1,000 square feet. However, when you look at the total number of parking spaces that are provided on the site, and that includes the parking spaces that are utilized by the fence contractor, even though these patrons wouldn't have access to it, the site actually has parking that exceeds our code requirement based on that industrial calculation.
Okay. So, and I think what I'm asking I think more is if we assume, where did we come up with the fact that I guess we have 17 people in the building and we have 17 parking spaces? Why is there necessarily a one-to-one? And I guess let me share some data that I was looking up. It looks like we're assuming that every person who attends this is going to be driving individually. And at least some data that I found, the average light vehicle occupancy in the United States in 2017 was 1.67 people per vehicle. So why are we necessarily assuming that everybody is driving there individually?
We just make that assumption as a worst-case scenario, but you are correct. More than likely, people will carpool or they'll drive together. But for purposes of determining what the potential maximum would be, we assume that a person drives there individually in their own vehicle.
And Commissioner Perkins, if I may as well, we do make an assumption of 1 person per vehicle as the most conservative approach, but if the applicant believes that their average persons per vehicle is lower based on their specific use, they can also provide a study to the city that supports that, and that study would be considered as part of their request for a deviation from parking requirements due to unique operating characteristics. In this case, the applicant opted to not do that type of study, but to go this route of a conservative approach.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So we're taking the most conservative, worst case: nobody bikes, nobody walks, and nobody carpools. And even in that case, we still have enough parking. But then if people are carpooling or biking or walking, then we presumably will have some excess parking here, as I understand it. Would that be an accurate summary?
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that is all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Perkins. Commissioner Russell, do you have any questions of staff? May have lost Commissioner Russell. Commissioner Russell, are you on the line? Okay, we'll come back. Commissioner Colbert, do you have any questions of staff?
Yes, thank you, Mel, for a great presentation. I do have a couple of questions. For the first request, conditional use permit, my question is, given the emergence of these non-traditional uses across the city, and your statement within the staff report on page 2, I believe that there are 2 existing uses similar to this, one approved in 2016 and one approved in 2018. Will this use, as we move forward, be a part of the code cycle cleanup? Is this something that we look to incorporate in the future to prevent such request?
Ms. Lee, Mr. Lee, Ms. Lee? Any question?
We are in the, Commissioner Colbert, we are in the process of doing a cleanup update to our zoning code. However, I am not aware if the incorporation of this type of use is part of that.
Okay. I would like to request that we kind of include these uses, given the emergence of those. We're using a very antiquated parking as far as our guidelines, given that we're looking at arcades, which are more so, phased out in comparison to escape rooms or axe throwing rooms, things which are becoming more common and less so non-traditional uses. So that's just a statement that I wanted to make to staff on the conditional use permit. On the second request for the minor conditional use permit, I have a question, and maybe this could be answered by staff and or the applicant, but are we encouraging or incentivizing any ride share services, or should I direct that to the applicant?
I was just glancing at the applicant. He indicated that they do not have a program in place where they incentivize or encourage ride sharing.
Okay. And my second question related to the minor conditional use permit is nowhere in the staff report, based off the fact that it does state that we will not be accepting any walk-ups and that reservations will have to be made prior to. I would like to understand from staff or the applicant how reservations are made, or is there a marketing strategy associated with this, given that individuals won't be able to walk up? How will they know or know how to procure a reservation at this site?
Yes, Commissioner Colbert, the applicant has indicated that he will respond to that question.
Okay. I guess my next question will be for him as well, but I will just put it out there. It's based on the employee size, which is that guaranteed to remain 3 employees throughout the duration, or if it grows, will we reduce the parking or increase the parking requirements, given that if it exceeds 3 people, either the reservations for each room will have to decrease, or the parking will have to increase, one or the other. So I just want to put that down as a question to staff or the applicant.
Yes, the applicant indicated that he will respond to that.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Colbert. Commissioner Russell, have you joined us again?
I did. I got back on. Thank you. Yeah, a couple of my main questions were concerning information about the other escape rooms and if there'd been any community problems, and it doesn't sound like there have been. And I also, just to echo some of the other commissioners, couldn't quite figure out I know that the parking requirement as stated, but I don't think it logically works out in terms of how this may work in terms of people coming together. I mean, they usually come as a group. So I just want to also echo that we perhaps need to relook at zoning around these. But that's it.
Okay, Vice Chair Harlan, any questions of staff?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any immediate questions. I think Commissioner Zick and Commissioner Colbert covered some of my questions relative to the parking. So I will go ahead and open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward. Good evening, sir. I would ask that you would state your name and address for the record and ask if you've read the staff report and the conditions of approval and if you agree with them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Long John Nguyen. I have read the staff report in its entirety.
Okay, sir, if you would like to make a brief presentation, you may.
I don't have anything to present at this time.
Okay, any comments on your experience? So I'll ask you, any experience that you've had in this business? Do you run escape rooms in other jurisdictions? Your success with them? So maybe you can provide that kind of fill for us.
Sure. I currently own and operate an escape room in Irvine, California. We've been there for about 4 years, and our escape room has had some modest success with enthusiasts and first-timers alike. So we have been looking for a place to move our location. It's currently 1,100 square feet, and at 1111 Baker Street in Costa Mesa looks like the best place to expand to, with 3,800 square feet inside. So we currently run an escape room with just one game inside of it, which we've grown to love, and we'd like to take our business to Costa Mesa. So the multiple games running at once and the operational requirements with that have been worked out with our senior planner, Mel Lee, and he's given us a lot of recommendations, so I want to thank him for that. And we're open to the suggestions of the city on how to have operations that are in line with the city's codes.
Okay, and in your Irvine operation, have you had to stagger the arrival and departure of various parties, similar to the condition of approval in tonight's staff report of a 30-minute gap?
That was not a requirement for us. The city of Irvine asked us instead to stagger our start time to be after AM and PM peak traffic, which meant to start at 6:45 PM at the earliest. So in doing so, we only have, again, one game. It physically only allows one group at a time. So the time gap was largely for our staff to go through the physical motions of resetting the game to be ready for the next group.
And how long does it take you to reset the game and essentially clean up, I imagine?
It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. We leave a little bit of extra time for people who come late, things like that, for us to use the restroom. Operationally, it doesn't take us 30 minutes. It'll take us about 10 to 15 minutes to prepare for the next game.
And did you have sufficient parking at your facility in Irvine?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Zick, do you have any questions of the applicant?
No, but I will have one more question for staff.
Okay, thank you, sir. Commissioner Tourget, do you have any questions of the applicant?
No, I do not.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yeah, I just wanted two quick questions. Number one is, travel to your game. It sounds like people are coming in groups. Do you have any of how people are getting more?
Commissioner Perkins, I might ask, if you're on your mobile phone, you're kind of breaking up. So maybe if you can reposition a little bit to get a better signal. Try again. Are you there?
Let's try. Is this better?
That's better, yeah. So go ahead with your question.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was wondering how people tend to travel to the facility in Irvine. I was wondering if you happen to know if people were traveling in groups or traveling individual. Do you have any questions on that?
Yes. So similar to the Costa Mesa location, we are not situated off of or not right on the main street or places like that. I don't think everybody that I've seen in the last 4 years has driven to our location. And as other people mentioned, a large number of people are carpooling. We typically see 2 to 4 people in one car. I don't know if that's representative of how Costa Mesa travels, but most people are, let me say that our games are for private groups only, of friends, coworkers, family. So they're typically traveling from the same location and all playing by themselves. So there's no strangers who are meeting them there. So this, while we don't encourage or ask people to carpool, people are doing that just because it's convenient for them to do so. We plan to continue our operations for the new escape room, if approved, in a similar way with private games only and private groups. So we would expect that people would carpool since it is convenient.
Thank you. And then just follow-up question, I was noticing on the plans, I was wondering, do you have any bike racks planned on your facility for people who are going to be potentially biking in?
I don't believe we have any at the site, and we haven't considered that, any bike racks on location.
Okay, great. I would just encourage you to maybe consider, I know I was out at the site a couple days ago. It looks like it might be tough to place a bike rack, but it would be, I think, great to encourage that. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you very much, and that's all my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Perkins. Commissioner Russell, do you have any questions of the applicant?
No, I don't.
Okay. Commissioner Colbert, I know you did. So please.
Yes, Mr. John, if you could, the question that remains are how many employees are projected to be on site? Will it always remain at 3 as a constant, or is that projected to grow in the near future? And if so, what are the planned modifications for that?
Yes. So for staff, we have one staff member who acts as the host for the game. So there's one staff member assigned for each group or room, as the PowerPoint showed. We have a maximum of 3 rooms planned, so we would only have a maximum of 3 staff. Our staff do not come to work unless there is a booking or a reservation for the game that they are hosting. So we would have a maximum of 3 staff at any time.
Okay, thank you. And that leads to my second question. How are the reservations made, and how is the marketing done for this particular site?
Sure. So our reservations are made by website only. We have a website, unlockedoc.com, in which our booking software is integrated. We take, again, reservations only and no walk-ins due to the previous comment I made about staff only reporting to work when there is a booking for that game. So the reservations are made online. We do Google advertisements, Facebook advertisements mainly, that we found to be most effective.
Okay. Is there and just out of curiosity now, is there going to be a sign outside of the facility which advertises the escape room?
I'm sorry, do you mean a sign facing the street or a sign just in front of the building?
Anywhere visible to the public eye?
We don't currently have a space for that, but I believe in the report it did say if we wanted to pursue any signage that we would have appropriate channel to go through.
Okay. I only ask that as it may provoke interest from individuals who may not be reserved, which could create congestion on site, but not too concerned, but just wanted to mention that as a concern. I think the final question you ask the employees, the marketing, and the carpooling strategy is a question that I want to come back to. Is there any interest or opportunities to incentivize rideshare programming at the site, given that individuals already kind of carpool and that there are private groups which will be planning ahead? Are there opportunities to incentivize through discounts? I've seen a number of programs throughout various adjacent cities that have integrated such programs when they have parking constraints.
We don't currently integrate that, but we do have channels to contact our customers. For example, we send the reminder emails about when their appointment times or reservation time is, and we can integrate that in there. And that's a great comment, and I think I would have to do a little bit more research on how to incentivize them properly.
Okay. Thank you for taking that comment. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Colbert. Vice Chair Harlan, you have any questions of the applicant?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I have just a couple. Explain to me how the control room works within the facility. Is it a CCT monitoring system in every room, and that's where you're watching? And so explain how the control room works to me.
And that's correct. There are a handful of cameras and microphones that are placed into the top corners of the room to be able to view the players. We are able to listen and watch as they solve the puzzles. That is connected to, as you said, a CCTV into that central room where the staff could sit and monitor. And we, in our current operation, give them a walkie-talkie for which to hear us if they need any help with the puzzles that they're working on.
Okay, and in your Irvine operation, do the city or require, or do you have in place just for sake of your own protection, any on-site security?
We don't have any on-site security, and that wasn't mentioned in the city of Irvine.
Okay, have you ever had to request police service at your Irvine facility?
No, we haven't. We've had excellent customers so far.
Fire service? Any kind of medical aid calls?
No, not at all.
Okay. Relative to, and this will be a question I'll follow on with on staff, relative to installing bike racks, would you be open to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, those are all the questions I have of the applicant. Thank you, sir. I'll have you come back up in a minute. Julie, have we received any email? I'll open it for public comment. Have we received any email communications on this item?
Not at this time.
Okay, I will close the public comment. And I'm assuming, sir, you've said what you wanted to say. There's no reason to have you pop back up here unless one of the commissioners has an additional question. So we'll close public comment. Commissioner Zick, you said you may have some additional questions for staff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I did. And my question had to do with noticing. So I'm assuming we noticed adjacent property owners, is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Zick, that is correct.
And is the radius for that noticing, that's 500 feet, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So that would mean then that some of the residents on Cleveland and Coolidge would have likely received some notices. Also correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And we have not received any public response at all, positive or negative, to this application. That's also correct?
Just to clarify, I did receive a phone inquiry from one of the adjacent property owners. They had some questions, or their tenants had some questions about the parking, similar to what the commissioners asked tonight, but I answered their questions and they didn't have any further issues after I explained it.
Okay. Could you elaborate for me a little bit what the nature of those questions were?
Yes, the call I got was from a property owner, and apparently their tenants had received a postcard, so they were asking the landlord about it. So she called me about a week ago and was just asking just basically how the parking would work, because it is segregated for each parcel. And so I explained it. Basically, the parking's gonna be limited to their particular parcel with no overflow or overspill, and they were satisfied with my answer to that question. But
Great. Thank you for that, Mel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But they weren't interested in going on the record. They were just asking just how it works.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Tourget, any additional questions?
No additional questions.
Commissioner Perkins. Commissioner Perkins, do you have any additional questions? Commissioner Russell?
No additional questions.
Commissioner Colbert?
Yes, just for clarification, and it's related to the site plan, which is handwritten page number 21. And this, Mr. Lee could possibly answer this, and I believe it was answered in one of the slides. It's related to the handicap parking. I noticed that in the miscellaneous note 1 reads that this project is exempt from handicap upgrades except for restroom upgrade design. But I did notice that there were ADA compliant parking that exists on the site and also was noted on the site plan. Could you explain what this note means? And
Yes, Commissioner Colbert. Actually, if you look closely at the plan, the handicap space that note is referring to is actually for the fencing contractor building where they were doing some upgrades, and not to the existing building, which is where this use is going to be located. So you'll see, for example, proposed 2 handicap unisex restrooms upgrades. So that was all for the building to the rear and didn't affect the building towards the front.
got you. Thank you for that clarification. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Colbert. Vice Chair, any questions?
No, I do not.
Okay. So if I could have the applicant actually come up one more time, I have one other quick question, and Mr. Lee, you may know this as well. Are there any existing security cameras that are externally mounted on that building or any of adjacent buildings?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, Mr. Lee, do you know if there are or not?
I would imagine the fencing contractor probably has some
Okay.
for security purposes.
Okay. So, sir, just for the benefit of, because this is I know we've had this use in the city before. The location of this is kind of set back from the street. It's an unusual entertainment use. I don't have any particular objections to it. But I would ask you to consider, or maybe you are considering, a security camera at least mounted at your entrance, external. You may feel like you don't need it for the business purposes, but I'm thinking for the benefit of our public safety people at some point, if they ever needed to grab security footage, I would ask maybe that you would install a camera on the exterior of the building at your main entrance. Would you be willing to do that?
Yes, we'd be willing to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have no further questions, except of staff. Mr. Lee, if he agrees to put in a certain number of bike racks, does he get a parking space credit for that?
Yes, he does.
And how many racks does he need to get a parking space credit?
There isn't a number that I'm aware of that code indicates. It just basically says bike racks, but doesn't specify a number, is what I'm recalling.
And the credit that he receives is 1 parking space per bike rack.
Per bike rack, but
But it doesn't, for example, clarify how many bikes
Bikes
that you
you
can
can put
fit.
in.
Exactly. So staff uses the rule of reason when we review these types of things,
Okay.
and our professional judgment as to what's appropriate.
Okay. So per my question, if he installed a bike rack, he would get 18 parking spaces versus the 17 he has now?
That's correct.
I would strongly suggest you do that, sir, just for a little bit of wiggle room. All right, commissioners, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, is there a motion from any of the commissioners? I will ask you just to speak up if you do.
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Colbert, please proceed.
I move that we find the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of California Environmental Quality Act per CEQA guidelines, section 15301, class 1 existing facilities, and approve planning application 19-31, subject to conditions of approval. In addition to, I don't know if you conditioned the request for the entrance and or the bike racks, but if so, subject to those conditions.
Commissioner Colbert, I will second that motion if you are including as conditions an external security camera at the entrance to the building and the addition of bike racks.
That's correct.
Okay, I'll second that motion. Commissioner Zick, do you have any comments on the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll be supporting the motion. I'm intrigued and somewhat excited about this non-traditional, creative, recreational entertainment use. I don't know if this is a great location, average location or not, but an applicant wants to put a business there, and I encourage that and support that. With regard to parking, it's a little bit tough when we don't have a specific use like this codified with regard to parking requirements. And not that there's a science behind it, but those are generally based on empirical evidence, time tested, and so you really have a good idea for specific uses how much parking is usually appropriate, and this is a different circumstance. The calculation of the parking for this by the applicant and the rationale for the minor conditional use permit makes some sense to me. I think it's tight. I think Commissioner Perkins makes some good points when he talks about the active transportation aspect of this and the likelihood and maybe high probability of carpooling, which would lessen demand on parking. Of course, I'm optimistic that that stuff would happen, but obviously that isn't what I would count on in order for parking to work. But what I do count on is several things. One is that none of the adjacent property owners object to this use or object to the manner in which the parking has been calculated. Second, the hours of operation would suggest to me that if there is a parking problem, it would certainly be minimally impacted to adjacent businesses. And third, if it really did become a problem to the adjacent businesses, the condition of approval number 8, which is kind of one of those standard belt and suspender conditions, would protect the city, protect the adjacent property owners from a parking problem should there be one in the future. So I support the motion, and I wish the applicant good luck with his business. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Tourget, any comments on the motion?
Like Commissioner Zick, I will also be supporting the motion. I particularly enjoy escape rooms. They're a good use of time and a great thing to do with friends and family. My thought specifically as to what Commissioner Colbert mentioned in terms of the code and cleaning up the code. I think it's for uses like this where we need to understand the flexibility of parking needs and also the flexibility of uses. The fact that we are comparing this to an arcade, which, I haven't been to or seen in 20 years or so, aside from the ones we know, the large arcades at malls. I think this is something that we should be thinking about. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity to review this and see what it would look like to think further about how our code would address other opportunities like this. So that's all I have to connect.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Perkins, any comments?
Yes. Just a brief one. Again, I'm excited about this use, excited about innovative businesses coming into Costa Mesa, and just wanted to echo some of my commissioners' comments on the parking that Once again, we have a situation where parking is dictating operating conditions of business and limiting their hours of operation and limiting how many people they can have in their building. So I think we really need to sit down and look at what are appropriate parking requirements for a range of businesses. But I think this is an exciting opportunity. I'm very glad the applicant has brought this forward, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Russell, any comments on the motion?
Just quickly, yes, I'm excited about this. I participated in this escape room a few years ago, and it's very enjoyable. And based on my experience, there were 8 of us in my group, and I believe that related to 6 cars because some people travel together. So I just want to kind of echo everybody else's comments regarding looking at parking related to what people are actually doing. I think this is a really good example of people naturally carpooling. So I'll be supporting it, and I'm excited about it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Colbert?
I think everyone has covered my thoughts regarding this. Extremely excited. Thank you for bringing this business to Costa Mesa. Costa Mesa has shown itself to be a youthful, fun, and unique city for operational and recreational uses such as this. Since we're leading those efforts, I hope that we can lead the effort in our code and have other cities look to us to have been thoughtful and forward-thinking in terms of parking and really leading the way when it comes to these types of uses, which are becoming more frequent in municipalities across the country.
Okay, thank you very much. Vice Chair Harlan, any comments on the motion?
Just to echo what Commissioner Colbert had just said, I appreciate the fact that the applicant is looking for a new business opportunity and considered Costa Mesa. And we appreciate the business, and I wish him much success.
Okay, and I will just add that I agree. I'll support the motion. Obviously, I second it. I think it's a unique business. I'm not concerned about the parking. I understand why staff calculated, that each individual show up in their own car. I just doubt that will happen much, if at all. I want to thank the applicant also for flexibility with respect to the security camera and the bike rack. I trust that we bring consumers into the city of Costa Mesa for entertainment where there is no food and beverage, that after the entertainment is over, they will visit an F&B venue somewhere in the city. And so I think there's knock-on effects that I think are beneficial and are also justifications for supporting the motion. So with that, Julia, I would ask that you call for the roll.
Commissioner Perkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Russell?
Aye.
Commissioner Colbert?
Aye.
Vice Chair Harlan?
Aye.
Chair Jericho?
Aye.
Commissioner Zick?
Yes.
Commissioner Torje?
Aye.
So that motion carried by 7-0.
Thank you. That decision is final unless appealed to the City Council within 7 days. Thank you very much, sir, and good luck to you.
Thank you, everybody.
Commissioners, we're all doing okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
So we have planning public hearing item number 2. Julie, could you read that into the record, please?
Public hearing item number 2. Planning application 19-28 and tentative parcel map number 2019-174 for a 2-unit small lot subdivision residential development at 377 through 379 La Pearl Place. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Okay, and before we do that, Commissioners, I'm going to have Julie also read public hearing item number 3 into the record. It's the same applicant. contiguous lots, and then we'll make a motion if we want to combine these public hearings. So Julie, could you read planning hearing item number 3 into the record?
Public hearing item number 3, planning application 19-34 and tentative parcel map number 2020-103 for 2-unit small lot subdivision residential development at 385 through 387 La Pearl Place. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Okay, commissioners, okay, so before you answer the ex parte communication question, commissioners, I'm going to make a motion that we combine public hearing item number 2 and public hearing item number 3 for the sake of staff report, for presentation by the applicant, and to receive public comment, if any, although the items will be voted on separately. I'm going to make that motion to combine. Is there a second?
Second by Commissioner Zick.
Okay, Commissioner Zick has seconded that motion to combine public hearing item number 2 and public hearing item number 3. Julie, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Perkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Russell?
Aye.
Commissioner Colbert?
Aye.
Vice Chair Harlan?
Aye.
Chair Derickle?
Aye.
Commissioner Zick?
Yes.
And Commissioner Torje?
Aye.
So that motion carried 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, have you had any ex parte communications on planning application or public hearing item number 2 or public hearing item number 3? Okay, thank you. Hearing none. I'm assuming there were none. I have had none.
Oh, actually, Chair Derickle?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Perkins.
This is Commissioner Perkins. I had a conversation with a neighbor while on a site visit a couple days ago.
Okay, and I will thank you, Commissioner Perkins. I did receive a telephone message from Mr. Ridgway. I was not able to return the call to him prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. So with that, I will ask Ms. Lee to present the item.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Jennifer Lee, Assistant Director of Development Services. The items before you are proposals for two-unit small lot subdivision projects at 377 and 379 and 385 to 387 La Pearl Place. The small lot proposals were submitted under 2 separate planning applications, but are being presented in one public hearing since both projects incorporate the same site plan and architectural theme. Both projects satisfy the small lot development standards and meet the purpose and intent of the residential design guidelines. The applicant is requesting approval of a design review and tentative parcel map for the construction of 2 two-story detached single-family residences and a subdivision of a 7,200 square foot lot into 2 separate parcels at 377 and 379 La Pearl. In addition, the applicant is requesting similar approvals for the small lot project proposed at the adjacent lot, address 385 to 387 La Pearl Place. Although the projects are being presented together in one public hearing, the Commission is asked to make separate motions for each item. The properties are located on La Pearl Place on the east side of Costa Mesa, near the intersection of Tustin Avenue and East 15th Street. Both properties are zoned R2 MD, multifamily residential, medium density, and are surrounded by similar properties with a diverse mix of multifamily and single-family residences. The following slides show the existing condition of the neighborhood. This slide shows the 2-unit condominium development located directly west of the project site, which is shown in yellow on the left of this slide. Directly across the street to the north is a 1-story single-family detached residence and a 1-story duplex. To the east of the project site is a 2-unit small lot development that was approved in 2016. There are multiple 2-story residences within a 2-block radius of the project site, including a 4-unit small lot development project located on La Pearl Lane. and that's shown in this slide on the right side. The proposed projects have the same lot characteristics and incorporate the same site plan. Consequently, both proposals meet small lot development standards, including the front, side, and rear setbacks, as well as the required parking spaces, which will be provided in a 2-car attached garage and on the driveway in the front of the garage. In terms of open space, both projects exceed the minimum 35% open space requirement, providing for 44% open space per lot. The projects also satisfy the private open space requirement, which is a minimum of 200 square feet per lot. The conceptual master plan, landscape plan, is consistent with small lot development standards. Specifically, the proposed landscaped area for each lot is 955 square feet, which requires a total of 5 trees per lot. As proposed, the projects satisfy the required tree count, providing 5 trees per lot, and exceed the city's requirement for shrubs and ground cover. All existing trees are proposed to be removed with the construction of the new residences, including mature trees that are located within the front setback at both properties. Additionally, there are 2 existing palm trees located in the public right-of-way that would need to be removed to accommodate the construction of the new driveways for the residences at 377 and 379 La Pearl. Removal of trees within the public right-of-way requires approval from the city's Parks, Arts, and Community Services Commission. As such, a condition of approval has specifically been included in the resolution for 377 and 379 La Pearl, requiring approval of the proposed tree removal prior to issuance of building permits. The proposed parcel maps would subdivide each existing 7,200 square foot parcel into 2 separate 3,600 square foot lots with 1 residence on each parcel. Each project also requires the dedication of a 3-foot public sidewalk easement behind the existing right-of-way line on the Pearl, and that is required as a condition of approval included in the resolution. The developments meet the purpose and intent of the residential design guidelines, including second-story design, building mass and form, elevation treatments, roof forms, window placement, and site planning. The projects are also designed with high window sills and window offsets where appropriate, so that there are no direct views between the proposed and neighboring units' windows. The proposed architectural style is contemporary Cape Cod, which incorporates a mix of vertical, horizontal, and shingle siding, as well as stucco in a light sand finish. The design also includes casement windows, asphalt shingle roofing, and standing seam metal roof accents over covered entryways, as well as brick and stone veneer wraps around the front facades. The proposed residences are approximately 2,500 to 2,515 to 2,575 square feet in area and include 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, and attached 2-car garages. This slide shows floor plan 1, which is the larger floor plan. This slide shows floor plan 2, which is approximately 2,515 square feet. The floor plans are very similar, with open concept living spaces provided on the first floor and private spaces on the second floor. To conclude, the proposals meet the small lot ordinance development standards and are consistent with the city's general plan. In addition, the projects meet the intent of the residential design guidelines and are compatible with the surrounding 2-story developments. Lastly, standard conditions applicable to small lot projects are included in staff's recommendation, including requirements for block walls, water-efficient landscaping, CCNRs, as well as CCNRs that contain restrictions requiring garages to be used exclusively for vehicle parking. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt separate resolutions finding that each project is categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act under CEQA Guidelines Section 15303, new construction, and approved planning applications 19-28 and 19-34, and tentative parcel map numbers 2019-174 and 2020-103, subject to conditions of approval. Staff would like to propose 1 revision to a condition of approval. It's condition of approval number 35 in both resolutions. That condition of approval states a requirement that the applicant dedicate a 3-foot public sidewalk easement behind the existing right-of-way. Staff proposes to add text so that it reads, dedicate a 3-foot public sidewalk easement and construct sidewalk per city standards behind the existing right-of-way. This is a clarification of an existing requirement. We recommend that whoever makes the motion this evening include staff's proposed revisions. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have Caitlin Walsh, who is the planner on this project, available by phone to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee, and also Ms. Walsh for your work on an excellent staff report. Commissioner Zick, do you have any questions of staff?
I do have a couple, thank you. And I only have a couple because the staff report was so well laid out and explained that it really answered most of the questions that I had as I went through it. So first of all, just on the subject of noticing, I'm assuming again that we noticed all property owners within a radius of 500 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct.
And there were no comments received, positive or negative, from anyone?
Correct.
Okay. So thank you for that. So I'm looking at handwritten page 7, the condition of approval number 4, which refers to the applicant installing a 6-foot high decorative block wall. Would this be, I want to confirm, this would be both on either side of the property and along the rear of the property, correct?
That is correct.
And is 6 feet high the maximum height that wall can be built?
That is correct, unless they would apply for a minor modification to allow up to 8 feet.
Okay. And what is the reasoning why we would have 6 feet as a maximum?
That is our standard height for residentially zoned properties. I know in commercial we often do go up to 8 feet, but as far as code requirements for multifamily residential, the maximum is 6 feet.
So if they ask for a modification to build 8-foot high wall, what would be the factors that we would use in evaluating that for approval?
We would have to determine that it is compatible with the existing neighborhood. Typically, there has to be some sort of precedent set in the neighborhood that there are other fences that exceed 6 feet. So we would have to evaluate that if they chose to apply for that type of application.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking those questions, really foundational questions, is because I'm looking at the condition of approval number 7 on page 8. And this is a standard condition of approval that I have had concerns with. And I think because it's just a boilerplate condition, maybe that's why I have such a concern about it. And in particular, in this application, I have a concern. What I'm concerned about is that this condition would allow for these properties to be built at grade 30 inches higher than the adjacent properties, and then by installing a 6-foot high fence around their properties, the existing neighbors would be experiencing or have the potential of experiencing an 8.5-foot high wall along their property. And I just don't think that that should be allowed, and it's only allowed by virtue of this condition of approval number 7. So could you tell me why this is in here, and if it's in here for a good reason, is there a way that we could change that 30 inches to something that is more compatible in the neighborhood that might be more like 6 inches?
So Commissioner Zick, this is Jennifer Lee. I will attempt to answer your question. This is a standard condition because what it is intended to get to is to have a maximum limit on how much an existing grade can be changed. Usually, it's expensive to move dirt, and so usually when an applicant will only want to change the existing grade of a site if they're trying to address some drainage issues, for example, something that is a physical trait of the property that necessitates a change to the grade. So that's the assumption that this condition of approval is written with. So what it's intended to do is to put a cap on the amount that you can fill an existing property and raise the natural grade. So that is its intention. If there is a concern about fence height in this particular instance, I think your comments are correct in terms of what the result might be if changing the grade did occur. But I think we can address that through some wording in the conditions of approval. 6 feet is the standard residential fence height in most cities, including Costa Mesa. That is our expectation for residential fence height. We do allow for minor modifications, as Caitlin described, but those modifications are approved for cause.
Okay, so that makes sense. And I understand that. And I guess what I'm feeling like pushing back just a little bit on is the idea that, first of all, in a larger development, a larger piece of land, I can certainly understand that drainage would be something that would be, more of a say an unknown or a primary concern that would need to be dealt with and potentially have the flexibility of as much as 30 inches of grade change to deal with that. But in this case, where it's a very specific development, we know, well, probably should know exactly what it is that they're intending to do with the development, I would think that this condition of approval could be more customed to what is actually being requested of this project. So I guess that's a little bit of my pushback. But recognizing what you're saying, if this was going to be a problem, would we know that at the time of plan check?
Yes, we would know it at the time of plan check. We require a preliminary grading plan and then a final grading plan as well, or a precise grading plan.
Okay, and at this time, plans have not been submitted, I'm assuming, because it hasn't been approved, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for your answers, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Tourget, any questions of staff?
My question had to do with the block wall as well, but not. But actually, the presentation answered the question. I was concerned that the block wall would be in front, that there would be a decorative wall in front of the property and enclose it. And I see now that is the interior of the property. So I don't have any further questions on the block wall. In terms of the landscaping with the trees being removed, I was able to walk down the street this weekend and notice that the palm tree that is proposed to be removed is quite beautiful and quite large. I know that this isn't within our purveyance, but I did have a question of what happens to those trees that are removed from the right-of-way.
So actually, Commissioner Tourget, I think I can answer that, having been on the Parks Commission for so many years. Sometimes when the tree is removed, the arborist will make an assessment of whether or not it can be transplanted. If it cannot, there's a replacement requirement. It's a 3-to-1 replacement requirement, and I can't remember what the specifications for the individual trees are. It's like a couple of 12-gallon or whatever it is trees, and then another box tree. And typically that has to be planted, the box tree has to be planted in place where the tree was taken out, not always. And then usually the other, if it can't be, the tree is planted somewhere else in the city, or it's placed in the city's inventory at the corporate yard for planting later. Am I wrong on that, Ms. Lee? That's what I remember anyway.
That roughly summarizes it, yes. Generally,
Very roughly.
the Parks Commission evaluates the specifics of the trees, and the city's arborist takes a look at them as well and determines what the most appropriate treatment for the trees would be. And as part of their approval, they apply conditions of approval that could include tree replacement, as well as various other potential solutions.
Thank you. That was helpful to hear, especially with such a loss on the street.
Okay, you have
And that is all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Torje, very much. Commissioner Perkins, any questions of staff?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for staff for proposing the changes to condition of approval 35. I was going to ask a couple questions about that, but your proposals have resolved my questions. So thank you, and I have no questions.
Okay, Commissioner Russell.
I wanted to ask, first of all, I wanted to acknowledge I did have a conversation when I went out and looked at the property. I did talk to one of the residents, and he gave me quite a history of there's a large tree on the property, and I know it's planned to be removed. Has staff done any kind of evaluation whether it's ill, or is there any way to save that tree? It has quite a long history in the city.
I can respond to that. This is Caitlin Walsh. We did evaluate the tree. We did not require a report from a city arborist from the applicant. However, the applicant has indicated that there is some damage to the existing sidewalk, and based on the applicant's proposals, the tree would be located where the driveway is proposed. So I would defer that question to the applicant for additional follow-up.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Russell. Commissioner Colbert, questions of staff.
Hi, Ms. Welsh, great presentation. A couple of questions. I was looking for reference to, typically there is a citation within the staff report of previous or similar applications. And I was curious, and I didn't get the opportunity to review the previously approved projects on that street. What, if you could provide me with a quick summary, were the primary concerns of those who on the east or west or north or south of this property in the past when the first two developments in the neighborhood were constructed?
Ms. Lee?
I actually, reviewing the past staff reports, there was nothing significant that stood out. The other two projects that were proposed on the street did require the same right-of-way dedication. So, but I do not believe that the City's Parks, Arts, and Community Services Commission had to weigh in on any tree removals. But generally, with these types of proposals, we're looking at compatibility with the two-story design and seeing if there's prevailing two-story developments in the neighborhood.
Correct. And so prior to the two existing ones or the initial approval that was cited, there were no two-story developments on the street, am I correct? Or were they in proximity to those developments?
So the condominium development west of the project site, that was proposed in the 1990s. So that has been existing for some time. The more recent SLO development east of the project site was proposed in 2016. So at that time, there was prevailing two-story development in the neighborhood. The 4-unit SLO development on La Pearl Lane, I believe that was approved around 2010, but I can look into that for a certain date.
Okay. No, thank you. I think this kind of captures, I was just concerned to see what the community's concerns were regarding the construction of those two properties. My next question is for you. It's relating to the Parks Commission. I know that you stated that the trees would have to be removed to meet the the development requirements. In the case, and I don't know how their voting takes place, but in the case that they deny the removal of the trees, what happens?
Ms. Lee?
So in that case, the applicant would need to modify their design, and as a result of that modification, would need to apply for a modification to the entitlements that they're seeking this evening, and that would be processed back through staff.
Back through staff and not through the commission?
It would be processed back through staff and potentially be approved either at the level of the zoning administrator, or if staff felt that the revised design was warranted commission review, we could also refer it to the planning commission.
Okay. Okay. My third question is related to, you referenced during your presentation, and this is specifically, I guess, related to public hearing item number 3, the tree removal again. There is a condition cited, condition number 14, I believe, in the public hearing number 2, but I don't see that cited in public hearing item number 3 in the conditions of approval. Am I overlooking that, or could you provide a reference to place for that?
The condition of approval that you're referring to, you said it's condition of approval number 14 in public hearing item number 3?
Number 2.
Oh, number 2.
Caitlin, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that's the case because in public hearing item number 2, there are removal of trees that are proposed within the public right-of-way. For public item number 3, there are no tree removals within the public right-of-way proposed.
Thank you. Okay, that was my question. I wanted to know why they were different. Awesome. And my last question is for Mr. Mejia. It's related to infrastructure. Given that this community is changing and that there are denser developments within this neighborhood continuously, and the infrastructure within that area was probably built early on, are there requirements typically, or does the city evaluate upgrades to sewer, water, or other infrastructure that would be needed to support the denser population or growing population in that community?
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the answer is going to have 2 parts. Since the Costa Mesa Sanitation District and the Mesa Water District are independent agencies, they perform their own evaluation of the needs to upgrade their systems. As far as the city's infrastructure, I believe that this one is a surface flow for stormwater. And the street appears to be just based on the last time I looked at it in fair condition, so it will not require at this time any further improvements.
Okay. And Mr. Mejia, one further question relating to handwritten page number 8, condition of approval number 10. It states transformers, backflow preventers, and other approved above ground utility improvements should be located outside. So these are particularly related to the development itself and not so much related to the question that I asked earlier about underground infrastructure or utilities.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for that. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Colbert. Vice Chair Harlan, do you have questions of staff?
I do. I have one question related to condition number 35 and the proposed revision offered by staff, which was not just to dedicate, but to construct the sidewalk. I wanted to know if the development to the east of this project site, closer to Tustin Avenue, had also had that same condition and requirements.
I'm going to start with that. I haven't looked at specifically the conditions for that other development, but it is a standard condition to require that any time a development of this magnitude is improved, that through a combination of different conditions, it requires that the applicants or developers construct sidewalk and driveway improvements per city standards.
Right. So the idea is that incrementally, as properties are being redeveloped, a ultimately we'll have a continual sidewalk for that area, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any questions at this moment, so I will open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward. If you have a presentation, state your name and address for the record, and confirm to me, one, that you have read the staff report, and two, the conditions of approval, and if you agree with them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name's Ryan Oldham. I am the project architect for the project. Just a point of interest, I was also the project architect for the development right adjacent at 391 La Pearl a couple years ago. I have read the staff report and conditions of approval. We do have a couple items that we want to bring up with the conditions of approval and bring them to Planning Commission's attention.
And they are?
Item number 5 that requires block wall fencing on the interiors of the development. So that would be between 3 of the homes. We are requesting Planning Commission to consider that we are able to use decorative wood fencing between the homes with just block wall fencing around the perimeter of the 4-home development. We have been in conversation with staff about this, and they have asked us to defer it to Planning Commission. So we are asking that we may be able to use wood fencing instead of block wall fencing.
Okay, and what's the other condition that you're objecting to?
Condition number 3 requires us to have the final parcel maps recorded with the county prior to issuance of building permits. We are asking Planning Commission to consider allowing that prior to building permits, we only need to file final map with the county, and then prior to certificate of occupancy, we will have the map recorded. Only because the county has quite a backlog of recording maps, and what ends up happening is we end up getting through plan check and sit around waiting to start construction for another 6 months because the map is still recording. We've also talked with staff about this. We understand their reasoning for it, but if for some reason the map were not to record as single lots subdivided, we would just end up with a 2-home development on a single lot in an R2 zone. And then my last one, I just want to clarify, condition of approval number 13 asks, it mentions landscaping in the driveways. And we do show this on our plans, but we would like to see about getting this changed to just being decorative driveways, whether we do some type of stone joints or pavers or whatnot, instead of actually putting turf joints in the driveway.
Okay, those have been noted, sir, so please go ahead with your presentation if you have one.
I do not have any further presentation at this time.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Oldham. Commissioner Zick, do you have questions of the applicant?
Yes, so I have 2 questions. The first one is...
And Commissioner Zick, could I interrupt quickly? I'm sorry. I needed to formally open the public hearing and have the applicant come forward, and everything you said is part of the record, so Commissioner Zick, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My question is whether or not you have a final grading plan developed at this point, and whether you heard what my concern was and have a response to it.
Sure. We do not have a final grading plan at this time. I did hear your previous question. I can tell you, because I was the architect on the 391 La Pearl Place project from a couple years ago, that is directly adjacent towards Tustin Avenue. Our increase in grade was maybe 6 inches, I want to say. We do not look to import that much dirt to build these lots up, and we don't really need to. We really only need, the way that the drainage works out, we really only need to drain the front half of the lot to the street. And so naturally speaking, just the existing height of the lot plus about 6 inches gets us the gravity fall on the drainage that we need to have.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my second question, relative to your inquiry on condition of approval number 5, would you be just as amenable to a vinyl fence as opposed to a wood fence?
We would, yes.
Okay, thank you for that answer, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Torje, questions of the applicant?
My question was related to the wood fence on the interior wall. Commissioner Zick mentioned the vinyl wall on the interior, and I think that actually answers my question.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Perkins, questions of the applicant?
Yes, one question. When looking at the plans on page 29, the landscape plans, also discussed in the staff report on page 6, it looks like you are selecting Brisbane box trees I think if I'm reading the plans right, I believe they are in the side yards, which reach roughly 5 feet wide. In some research I did, it looks like Brisbane boxes can get to be 60 feet tall and 25 feet wide with potentially invasive roots. I just wanted to see if the applicant might be interested in maybe revising that tree choice for something maybe dramatically smaller that would fit in that space without incredibly aggressive back pruning of it.
Certainly. I wish I could speak more intelligently. My landscape architect is not here, and I can only talk so intelligent about trees. But yes, we would be open to picking any type of tree the city felt more appropriate for side yards that fall within their allowed trees.
Great, and I would say maybe talk with staff about city requirements. I'm not sure what those are. My understanding is there may not be a lot of them, but I just wanted to bring that up as a potential concern. That is all of my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Perkins. Commissioner Russell, any questions of the applicant?
No, not at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Colbert.
My question was asked. It was related to the trees and landscaping. I have one question for staff when we get back to them.
Okay, Vice Chair Harlan.
Yeah, I would appreciate a little bit more explanation. I think you kind of alluded to condition number 3 and the challenges associated with that. So you're requesting that we modify the condition so that the subdivision map, it's not a matter of recording, it's a matter of simply filing it before you get grading permits and building permits. And then the recording requirement is necessary before issuance of the C of O. So my question is, what happens if you ultimately can't get the map recorded?
Then the project, because it's my understanding, this is probably a better question for staff, I suppose, but I suppose we would have to pursue some type of, I guess, condo map in that sense. So it'd be 2 units on a single lot with CC&Rs and all the rest of the stuff that goes along with that.
Okay. I think I'd like to hear from staff, but I thought maybe you had some more insight as to what I can understand from an administrative standpoint, from a builder's standpoint, how it would be beneficial to hold off on the recording, but I certainly want to hear staff's response to this as well.
Yeah, if I just may say, in doing this in other cities, this, the recording of the map prior to building permits being issued is a bit unique with Costa Mesa. I think once the tentative map is approved and we filed for the final map, I don't feel like as a builder, we perceive there to be a lot of risk there in the map not being approved.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you.
Is that it, Vice Chair?
That is it.
Okay. Mr. Oldham, let me ask you on condition of approval 13, which you had you asked for a modification that it read that it requires some kind of decorative driveway. Would you be amenable that whatever material that is, it must be permeable or semi-permeable?
Yeah, we're fine with that. That just tends to help our water calculations, our drainage calculations, sure.
Okay, and the vinyl fencing, I understand, wood fencing, okay. That's all the questions I have for you at the moment. So I will open this to a public hearing to public comment. Julie, have we received any email communications from the public on this item?
Not at this time.
Okay, so we'll close the public comment. And if there's any other questions of staff, I have one. I know Vice Chair Harlan, you have one relative to the recording of the map.
Commissioner Colbert had one as well.
Okay, so Commissioner Zick, do you have any other questions?
Well, I have one, and it's really a nit, and it has to do with that condition of approval number 13. I guess my first part of my question, and this is to staff, why do we have that as a condition? Why do we require the landscape ground cover in the gaps in the driveway?
I can respond to that. This has been a standard condition of approval that we have applied to past small lot development projects. The idea is to encourage permeable pavement or some sort of permeability to allow rainfall to drain through.
So if the driveway was a contiguous slab of concrete, if that's what they had proposed instead, then this condition of approval wouldn't have been applicable, correct?
Correct.
So it's only because they proposed that architectural treatment for a driveway that this condition was inserted. Is that right?
Sorry, to clarify, we do include this condition of approval as a standard condition of approval for small lot development projects. So all small lot development projects would have this condition of approval included in the resolution. The type of material that is proposed on the driveway varies from proposal to proposal. Sometimes we see permeable stone pavers, or we see concrete with the turf joints.
Would we not allow a concrete driveway, a contiguous slab of concrete as a driveway?
Correct.
Oh, we would not allow that. Okay. And then my second question, because we require landscaping, is that, and I'm looking at the staff report page 2, and I don't see a landscaping, I may have missed it, I don't see a landscaping requirement. So is that area, are we counting on that landscape ground cover in any of our calculations, or does it not matter to us whether it's landscape or permeable pavers?
It does not apply towards the landscape requirement or open space.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Torje, any additional questions?
No additional questions.
Commissioner Perkins.
Just 2 questions. Number one, I think I had a discussion with staff offline about the trees, but I wondered if we could share that openly. For tree requirements and tree pallets, what are the development options or requirements for trees not in the public right-of-way? Is there a city tree palette or something the developer can choose from?
Ms. Lee?
We do have
Wait.
a private property. Oh, go ahead.
No, Ms. Walsh, go ahead. You're on a roll
We
tonight.
do have a private property tree palette for street landscape setback areas, but we do not have it specifically for interior yards. With that being said, the tree palette does have a variety of trees that are broken down by box size and also species type.
Okay, great. So there's some reference the developer could use at least as a starting point, but not necessarily a firm requirement that they would have to select among.
Correct.
Great. And so thank you on that. For the proposed modification to condition of approval 5, allowing sort of wood fencing or vinyl for the interior walls on the project sounds potentially fine to me. One question I have is when we come down to the wording of the actual condition of approval, since we're approving these as two separate hearing items, condition of approval 5, I believe, only applies to the wall in between the two houses that are being built on each lot, not in between the houses on the two separate plans that we have. So I wanted to inquire about staff how that potential issue could be dealt with, because it seemed like we wanted the applicant is requesting wood walls on all of the areas between all 4 of their houses.
I can respond to that. Yes, you are correct. Because it was submitted as 2 separate applications, the master development lot is the boundaries of the original parcel. So the block wall requirement would be around each set of 2 homes.
Okay. And so is that... So the block wall requirement would be around each set of 2 homes. As I understood it, the applicant was requesting to have wood fences between, say, all 4 of the homes with block walls just around the very outside. Is there a way to make that happen, or is it just or are we more just saying wood fence in between the 2 on each lot?
I think that
So
we
the code
are...
Go ahead.
Sorry, Caitlin. From staff's perspective, the code dictates that we have a block wall around the development lot. So where staff sees flexibility and subject to commission discretion is the fencing between the two small lot projects on the same master development parcel. Having said that, this is a standard condition of approval that's been applied to small lot projects over time. But there is some discretion here for the commission. Whatever you decide this evening, staff will apply to future small lot projects as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify how that would work. I'm interested to hear my fellow commissioners' ideas on how to potentially implement the applicant's desire. Thank you. And that is all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Perkins. Commissioner Russell, questions of staff? Final questions?
No, I'm just to follow up on Commissioner Perkins, how we can maybe facilitate the vision of the applicant, because that does make more sense. It's kind of an unusual situation when we have 2 parcels that are being kind of planned as one in reality. So just however we can work with them on that. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Colbert?
Yes, my question is related to condition of approval number 3, and the applicant referenced a conversation with staff, and I wanted to understand what the details of that conversation were, and also the applicant referenced earlier that he also completed the project, I believe, adjacent or on the same street, and what were the conditions in that application, or did that not require him to file or record the subdivision map before moving forward if it required one?
Mr. Chairman, this is Barry.
Yes, Mr. Curtis. Go.
I can address the questions related to condition of approval number 3. the issue that staff has, and I'll let my staff jump in and correct me if I go sideways here, but the issue that staff has is that the small lot project has different setback requirements and different development standards than it would be if it's not a small lot project. So if we were to move down this road and start construction of these dwellings and the map never gets finalized, the recourse would be to come back either for a variance or to demolish the buildings to make them meet the standards. So that's where we're running into a concern here. Certainly, in looking at the condition, I'm willing to allow grading to occur. That's just moving dirt. And while we continue to look at this, I would suggest a revision to the condition just to add to the very end of the condition, unless otherwise agreed to by the Director of Development Services. That way, the Commission's decision doesn't preclude us coming up with a solution that allows us to be met. We have reached out to all of our neighboring communities and discussed similar circumstances where an approval has different standards than otherwise would be underlying for the project. And everyone that I spoke to, every building official and every planning director, indicated they wouldn't issue permits under those circumstances. So that's where we are. Completely understand Mr. Oldham's concerns. It does take a long time to get through the county for something that sort of is a formality typically. But nonetheless, it could lead us into this very bad situation, and that's why we've been reluctant. As I said, we're happy to continue to look at this, and I would suggest that if the Commission wants to entertain that you just add that wording to the end of condition number 3 to allow us to try to resolve this in a better way for the applicant.
If I can ask a follow-up question related to that, I think Ms. Lee stated that this particular application and the conditions would set a precedent for future small lot developments. Is that correct?
In what context, Mr. Colbert?
I'm not sure. I just heard her reference, and I wanted to get clarification on that as well, that this is a passing of this would be used for other development. The conditions of approval would need to be similar for other developments. Or just.
I think it was related to the interior fencing, Ms. Lee.
Oh,
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
My comments about precedents were related to condition of approval number 5, related to how staff treats interior fence materials. But in general, when I say precedents, I don't by any means mean a legal precedent. I just mean that as staff processes small lot projects over time, we do want to be consistent in the conditions of approval that we apply. So if the Commission gives staff direction this evening on any one of these topics, our intention would be to carry that direction forward to future applications.
Thank you for that clarification. I have no more questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Zick.
Thank you. So I do have another question, and it is on that exact point about the block wall. So my initial sense was to try to listen to the applicant and maybe understand and potentially be open to what it was that he was interested in. But what I guess I'm increasingly concerned about is an idea that suggests that as we might be flexible on this development and say between two homes, the interior wall could be vinyl or wood as opposed to block. In my mind, there's almost no difference between the wall between the furthest removed homes of these two developments from existing properties or interior homes that are part of this development. I'm not sure I see a difference. And so if our standard is to have block walls, all of a sudden, that's all I'm interested in seeing is block walls. So my question is, as I say all that, why is it that we require block walls as a condition of approval?
I'll start out, and Caitlin, please correct me if I need correcting. The requirement for block walls around parcel lines is something that's unique to the multifamily zoning district as compared to single-family residential, for example. So the reason that staff has included the condition of approval for a block wall around the master development lot is because that is essentially how code is written for the multifamily residential zone. From our perspective, the requirement for a block wall, to my understanding, was put into place because there was an interest in seeing high-quality materials for these types of separations as opposed to some cheaper options for small lot projects. If the interest is different, I think where the flexibility lies is for the commission to give direction to staff on preferences related to interior fence materials.
Okay, that's a good answer, and I like your recommendation of block wall. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Vice Chair Harlan, questions?
I think Mr. Curtis answered most of my question regarding condition of approval number 3, and I just want to share that I do understand the city's concerns about moving too far ahead and having a fairly drastic remedy if, in fact, the map isn't recorded. On the other hand, I do understand the need for the development community to move forward with an entitlement. So to the extent that we can have some flexibility, as Mr. Curtis had suggested, with some language, and in particular allow for grading permits to be issued prior to recording, that would be my preference. And that's all my questions.
Okay. I just have one related to the palm tree. I guess I needed some clarification. So, Ms. Walsh, did you say that that the city's arborist has not examined the tree?
That's correct.
Okay. So from some, so the Parks Commission will have a look at this. It'll be a tree removal request. And if I'm correct, if I remember my history correct from being on that body, when a tree removal request is made, that tree is automatically assessed by the arborist. Is that correct? I believe it is. Mr. Curtis or Ms. Lee or...
Mr. Chair, if I may add.
Yes, Mr. Murray, you and I have sat through many Parks Commission meetings, so you do know.
We have, and we do, our city's arborist will evaluate every tree in the public right-of-way and include his or her findings as part of the staff report that is presented to the PACs. Trees outside of the city right-of-way are not evaluated by our city arborist. That would have to be evaluated by an independent arborist.
Okay, that's correct. Okay. Those are it for my questions. So I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, are there any motions or additional comments on public hearing item number 2, which is PA 19-31?
Mr. Chair, this is Vice Chair Harlan. I'll take this.
Vice Chair Harlan, please.
So I will move that we find the project categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act per CEQA Guidelines Section 15303, Class 3, new construction, and approve planning application 19-28 and tentative parcel map 2019-174, subject to conditions of approval, including the recommendation from staff with regard to, I think it was number 35, condition number 35 about dedicating a public sidewalk and constructing the sidewalk behind the existing right-of-way. and the suggestion from staff regarding condition of approval number 3, adding language giving, I don't remember exactly what you said, Mr. Curtis, but it was something to the effect of not to conflict with the direction of the planning director.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
sorry
sir.
to interrupt. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I can read that. Per the Vice Chair's recommendations, what I would recommend is that in conditions number 3, the words grading permits or be deleted, and at the end of the sentence, comma, and then unless otherwise agreed to by the Director of Development Services. So that would allow grading permits to proceed and would also allow us, if we can work out an agreeable solution, to move forward with that.
Okay, I'm good with that.
And Vice Chair Harlan, relative to the applicant's request regarding the interior fencing, is it your desire to respond to that or just leave the condition as is? And that would be condition number 5.
I have a feeling there may be some discussion on this point, so I'm willing to leave it as is now, and hear from my colleagues. And
I'll second that motion then.
So Commissioner Zick, you're seconding the motion with the modification to condition number 3 as articulated by Mr. Curtis, condition number 35.
Correct.
And then any modifications to the conditions relative to the decorative driveway.
It wasn't in the motion, but if the maker of the motion wanted to include that, I'm amenable to it.
I'm willing to include that. I don't know if there was proposed language to that effect, but I'm willing to consider that.
I think it was to substitute permeable pavers for the landscape ground cover.
That's acceptable to the maker of the motion.
Okay, I accept that as well.
Okay. So we have a motion by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Zick. Are there any comments on the motion from Commissioner Zick? We'll start with you.
No, I'm satisfied with these projects as planned and recommended and conditioned. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Tourget.
No additional comments for me. I really appreciate this project.
Okay, Commissioner Perkins.
No additional comments.
Commissioner Russell.
No additional comments.
Commissioner Colbert.
Couple of questions / comments, I guess. There was a condition of approval request for item number 4. Was that modified for the block wall for the wood or fence or vinyl fence?
No, Commissioner Colbert, that was actually condition 5.
Handwritten page 7?
Yes.
Okay. So are we moving? I know they said that there might be.
Yeah, as the motion has been made, that condition remains as it is written in the original staff report.
For condition number 4 or condition number 5?
For 5.
For 5. Okay. What conversations were we having relative to that? Because I did have a couple of comments on it.
So Commissioner Zick and I can't remember who else asked about different materials for the interior fencing from decorative wood to vinyl. I believe it was Commissioner Perkins that asked about the vinyl, actually. And so those two items those materials were discussed. It sounds like from the maker of the motion and the second that they prefer that the condition number 5 remain as written.
Okay. I guess my only comment with this is I'm overall in support of this project, given that it does create more opportunities to create housing in the community. I guess my one concern would be that the perimeter fencing option with the block wall, the block wall no longer exists. Just want to make sure I'm clarifying. I think I'm struggling.
So Commissioner Colbert, keeping in mind there are two maps that are being filed for these two applications, page 2 and
Right.
page 3.
Right.
You need a block wall around the map property line, external property line on the map for pH 2, and a block wall around pH 3 property line, external.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and
what the applicant was requesting is that essentially the block wall between the property line, interior property line between pH 2 and pH 3, and then between the residences be allowed to be something other than block wall.
Okay. Yeah, I think I follow now, and I want to continue with that comment then, is that the block wall, I think, creates a distinct characteristic within a community that is no longer consistent with the surrounding usage. And I thought that the goal was to create a consistency as we continue to develop this area if this pattern continues, so as not to distinguish or separate these properties. And so that's my only concern, that a block wall, which would really be distinctive along the property or the perimeter of the site, and I just think it would stand out too much. But I want to support this, but that's just a comment that I wanted to make on the motion.
Okay, thank you, sir. So to the Vice Chair and Commissioner Zick, I'm going to ask if you'll consider modifying condition of approval number 5. Prior to building permit, the developer shall construct a decorative fence, decorative fence, a minimum of 6 feet in height on the interior property lines of the master development, whether it's vinyl or wood, doesn't matter to me. My reason for asking that modification in the condition is that I feel like that if you have these two houses together, they're surrounded, you have these 4 houses together. It's essentially a 4-unit project. They're all surrounded by a decorative block wall around the entire perimeter. And then to throw a decorative block wall in between the pairs of homes, just because we're talking about 2 different maps, it seems like it really compartmentalizes the project and kind of chops it in half and creates this kind of weird structure that almost to me kind of indicates that that this project as a whole, these 4 homes, really don't belong to one another. It strikes me as being a little overbearing, actually. And so I'm not gonna get down on both knees and beg you guys, but I think if we could do that interior fence wall as a fence, vinyl or wood, I think it would make for a better, more visually contiguous project. Let's put it that way. So,
Vice Harlan, would you mind if I spoke first to that?
No, go ahead, Commissioner Zick.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harlan.
Sure.
So a couple of things. First of all, to the comment that Commissioner Colbert made, my thought about that is that whether the interior fence was block, wood, vinyl, from the street, from the front of the properties, you wouldn't know the difference. So that aspect of it, I guess, is not too much of a concern to me. With regard, though, to the Chairman's question, I don't look at this as a 4-unit development. I look at this as 4 individual single-family homes. That's what's being built. That's what's being proposed. And the requirements that the city has for this kind of a development, I think, are the kinds of requirements that result in a quality development. And if you were to look at all 4 of these units when they're built, and you looked at these intervening walls, at the far extreme would be block, then say vinyl, then block, then vinyl, then block. And to me, that doesn't make any sense. If the quality of the project is characterized by the permanence of a quality block wall, then why wouldn't both sides of a person's home have that same quality block wall? So to me, the idea of putting a fence between 2 homes is more of an approach to cut cost than it is to actually serve the interests of the future buyers of these properties. I think that because there's going to be block wall on the backs of all the rears of all these properties and block walls on one side of each of these properties, then it just makes sense that there be block wall on the other side. So that's my comment on it.
Okay, Vice Chair.
Well, I'm glad I let Commissioner Zick go first, because I tend to agree with his reasoning. And I'm looking right now at the rendering, which is on handwritten 32, showing the 4 units from the front elevation. And he's absolutely right. It is drawn to show that there's fencing in between each unit. So you wouldn't, from the street, be able to see what the interior material is of that wall, whether it's block, vinyl, or wood. What I am not really comfortable with is trying to make a determination now, which I think is a bit of a slippery slope, to determine what materials are best. My personal preference, I like wood fences. My residence has wood fencing on 3 sides, but my neighbor put up a block wall a few years ago, and some people like it, some people don't. There are any number of ways to do a very handsome design with a concrete block wall. There are some just plain ugly block walls. I think it's really in the hands of the designer to figure out what level of aesthetic they're really going for. And if, in fact, these are going to be fairly pricey homes on the east side, I would hope that the developer would make the investment in putting quality materials. So I appreciate the interest in trying to change what's being proposed, but I will agree with my colleague, Commissioner Zick, that in this particular instance, I think that we stick with what's proposed and hope that the developer does, in fact, create something of value with the materials that have been proposed.
Okay, very good. All good comments. So with that, Julie, could you please call the roll on the motion for public hearing item number 2, planning application 19-28?
Commissioner Perkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Russell?
Aye.
Commissioner Colbert?
Aye.
Vice Chair Harlan?
Aye.
Chair Dirical?
Aye.
Commissioner Zick?
Yes.
Commissioner Torje?
Aye.
That motion carried 7-0.
Okay, and that decision is final in 7 days unless appealed to the City Council. Commissioners, any motion for public hearing item number 3, planning application 19-34?
I'm happy to make the same motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and Julie and staff, for the record, we're clear on the motion and the modifications to the conditions of approval per the previous planning application?
Yes, clear.
Okay.
And I'm happy to second it.
Okay. So we have a motion by the vice chair, seconded by Commissioner Zick, for public hearing item number 3, planning application 19-34. Commissioners, any comments on this motion?
For the record, this is Commissioner Colbert.
Yes.
I would like to state that given the justifications and comments by both Commissioner Harlan and Commissioner Zick, after looking at the design again, I think my focus and concentration was simply on the word decorative block wall and what the aesthetic would look like in the community. My comment still stands about the distinctiveness of it, minus those wood walls. But since that screening exists for those walls, I think that my concern is no longer valid in this case, unless that screening for some reason no longer exists. So I support this. I want to be clear on that, but I think my comments I don't want my comments to be misconstrued about this wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Julie.
One question.
Commissioner Perkins.
Yes, I was reviewing my notes on the requests from folks. Did we make a modification to item 13 to allow the decorative pavers in the prior motion?
Yes.
I would like to find out. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Wanted to just confirm that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for circling back and checking on that. Julie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Perkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Russell?
Aye.
Commissioner Colbert?
Aye.
Vice Chair Harlan?
Aye.
Chair Dirical?
Aye.
Commissioner Zick?
Yes.
Commissioner Torje?
Aye.
That motion carried 7-0.
Very good. Again, and that decision is final in 7 days unless appealed to the City Council. Thank you, sir, very much for your time. Good luck with your project. And that will take us to, open my agenda up to the right page. Public Services Report.
No reports tonight, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mejia, thank you very much for tuning in. Mr. Curtis, Development Services Report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick items. The first one is I wanted to advise the commission that we're planning to hold 2 hearings for the One Metro West project, starting with your next Planning Commission meeting. And the second item is that the public review period for the EIR for that project has been extended to March 30th in lieu of some of the circumstances around difficulty and inability to get to libraries and things that have occurred recently. And that would conclude my prepared remarks. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Mr. Preziosi, City Attorney Report?
No report tonight, Chair.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, I want to thank you very, very much for a great meeting and for clearly you've done all your homework, which I always appreciate, and for your patience with the technology and with your chair on trying to figure out a process to move the meeting along smoothly. You were all top shelf, so I want to thank you all very much. Staff, thank you very much. I know this is a hard time, and I know this is kind of a weird sledding for all of us, and you guys are working really hard with not a lot of hours in the day, and pulling this together was also, I really appreciate it. So I think we got through the work pretty smoothly, and so thank you all very much. With that, we will adjourn to our next Planning Commission meeting of April 13th, 2020 at 6 p.m. here at City Council Chambers. Hopefully we can all attend. Good night.
Julie?
Yes.
Hey, this is Kedarius. Quick question. As it relates to our binders, is it possible to drop the binder off? Because I would prefer to have an actual hard copy.
Commissioner Colbert, we will look into that possibility. We've been, as you might imagine, limiting the amount of paper that we're touching and the